We put tariffs on everybody in the world.
That is the United States ambassador to Canada speaking this week on the record to a journalist about why Canada should stop being frustrated with Donald Trump's tariffs. We put tariffs on everybody in the world. It is the most honest thing Washington has said about its trade policy toward Canada in 18 months. Not a negotiating position, not a diplomatic framing. A statement of fact delivered with the confidence of someone who believes the other side has no choice but to accept it. And then, when asked whether he understood why Canadians might be frustrated by tariffs applied to a country that had a signed trade agreement with the United States, Pete Hoekstra said, absolutely no. This week, we are going to go through exactly what Hoekstra said, what it reveals about Washington's real position, and why Carney's response to every single element of it was already built before the ambassador opened his mouth.
In an interview with Radio Canada, Pete Hoekstra says there will be no exceptions.
There's different tariffs for different parts of the world depending on economic circumstances and that. But the concept of tariffs is uniformly applied to everyone that we trade with.
No exceptions. There will be no exceptions. That is the clearest statement Washington has made about its tariff strategy toward Canada since the trade conflict began 18 months ago. Previous messaging from the Trump administration left deliberate ambiguity. Tariffs as negotiating tools. Tariffs as temporary pressure. Tariffs as leverage designed to produce specific behavioral changes that would then be rewarded with relief. That ambiguity gave Canada room to believe that the right combination of concessions and counteroffers could produce a path back to tariff-free trade. Hoekstra closed that room this week. The tariffs are not a negotiating tactic. They are policy, uniform, permanent, applied to everyone, no exceptions.
But hope isn't a plan, and nostalgia is not a strategy. We have to take care of ourselves because we can't rely on one foreign partner. We can't control the disruption coming from our neighbors. We can't bet our future on the hope that it will suddenly stop. But we can control what happens here.
We can control what happens here. That sentence is the complete strategic answer to no exceptions. Washington is saying the tariffs are permanent. Carney is saying permanence is not the problem. Dependency is the problem. And dependency is the one thing Canada can actually fix. If the tariffs are never going away, the answer is not to wait for them to go away. The answer is to build the economy that functions with them in place. That is precisely what Canada has been doing for 18 months. And Hoekstra's confession that the tariffs are permanent just made the case for that strategy stronger, not weaker.
We think the alcohol ban is totally unfair. It's a clear indicator of how 11 provinces feel about trade with the United States. You know, they're sending a very, very clear message about how doing business with the United States doesn't appeal to them. The Prime Minister has reinforced that message, okay? And so it creates some questions about, does Canada really want to do business with the United States?
Does Canada really want to do business with the United States? That question, delivered by the American ambassador to Canada, tells you exactly what Washington thinks of the current relationship and exactly what it wants Canada to do about it. The implicit answer Washington is looking for is yes. Of course Canada wants to do business. And to prove it, Canada should remove the alcohol bans, should stop diversifying its trade relationships, should be more like Mexico, which moved faster to remove trade irritants and secured a formal negotiation date for the Canada-United States-Mexico Agreement review as a result. This is the compliance model. Demonstrate eagerness to do business on Washington's terms and receive the reward of reduced friction. Mexico tried it. What Mexico got is a negotiation that begins from a position of demonstrated accommodation rather than demonstrated strength.
Canada remains open to deeper integration, including options for Fortress North America in selected sectors. And to be clear, those offers are on the table. But if that route is not ultimately possible, We will invest heavily in new markets and products. We'll reward those who build, buy, and produce in Canada, and we will build new partnerships abroad.
Those offers are on the table. That is the critical distinction between Canada's position and Mexico's. Canada is not refusing to do business with Washington. Canada is refusing to do business on terms that recreate the dependency that created the vulnerability in the first place. The alcohol bans are a response to American tariffs, not a cause of them. Removing the bans while the tariffs remain would be giving something for nothing. It would be the compliance model in action. And the compliance model produces a weaker negotiating position with every concession made before a formal negotiation has even begun. Canada's offer is on the table. Fortress North America, deeper integration, a real deal. But a deal, not accommodation.
He says, we like the fact that you're coming around on your military spending, your defense spending. They won't buy our cars, but we have to buy their planes, right? We won't buy their booze, but that's unfair for some strange reason. So it's, there's no consistency here in the administration's positioning.
No consistency. That observation from the CBC panel captures the central problem with Hoekstra's position this week. Washington wants Canada to buy American military equipment. It praises Canada for meeting its NATO spending target. It demands more defense investment, but it refuses to buy Canadian cars. It applies tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and automotive products manufactured in deeply integrated continental supply chains that benefit American workers as much as Canadian ones. It bans Canadian alcohol from government buildings and then complains when Canadian provinces respond with equivalent measures. The inconsistency is not accidental. It is the architecture of a relationship where Washington wants the benefits of integration without accepting the reciprocal obligations that integration normally requires. Canada met the 2% NATO target. The NATO Secretary General confirmed it. Hoekstra praised it and then said Canada needs to do more. The endpoint keeps moving because compliance is not actually the goal. Dependency is.
This year, foreign direct investment into Canada is already at its highest level in nearly 2 decades. It's running at twice the rate on a per capita basis as our nearest G7 competitor. And we're just getting started.
And we are just getting started. That line lands very differently after Hoekstra's defense spending comments. Washington praised Canada's NATO spending and demanded more. In the same breath, it applied tariffs that are supposed to be creating economic pain severe enough to force compliance. But the investment numbers tell a different story. Foreign direct investment at a 20-year high. Twice the Group of 7 per capita rate. The pain is real, but it is not producing the outcome Washington anticipated. And we are just getting started means the gap between what Washington expected and what is actually happening is going to keep growing.
You've got folks who are doing everything they can to get the Canadian public to rally against America. Just doesn't make any sense.
But do you understand where that frustration is coming from?
Absolutely no.
Absolutely no. That answer is either the most revealing diplomatic statement of this entire trade conflict or the most calculated one. And it does not matter which, because both interpretations lead to the same conclusion about what Washington thinks of Canada's position. If Hoekstra genuinely does not understand why Canadians are frustrated by tariffs applied to a country that had a signed trade agreement negotiated by Donald Trump himself, called the best deal ever by Donald Trump himself, and bereft of tariffs until Donald Trump decided to impose them anyway, then Washington is operating with a fundamental misunderstanding of Canadian political reality that makes any serious negotiation very difficult. If Hoekstra understands perfectly well but is performing incomprehension as a diplomatic strategy, then Washington is deliberately refusing to acknowledge the legitimacy of Canadian frustration as a way of delegitimizing Canada's resistance. If we do not understand your frustration, Your frustration is not a valid input into our decision-making. Either way, the message is the same. Canada's feelings about this situation are not Washington's concern. Accept the tariffs, remove the irritants, be more like Mexico, and stop rallying your public against us. The CBC panel got it exactly right. The more he speaks, the more it sounds like he is talking to the White House rather than to Canada.
Countries want to deal with Canada right now. They want to build those strategic partnerships. They want to invest more here. They want more trade. They want more partnership. We are very much in control of our destiny.
We are very much in control of our destiny. That line from Vancouver this week is the complete answer to everything Pete Hoekstra said in his Radio Canada interview. Accept the tariffs. Canada's answer is to build the infrastructure that makes the tariffs progressively less consequential. A pipeline to Asian markets, 20 trade agreements across 5 continents, foreign direct investment at a 20-year high, non-United States exports rising sharply. Does Canada want to do business with the United States? Canada's answer is the offer Carney has made repeatedly and publicly. Fortress North America is on the table. Deeper integration is possible. The Canada-United States-Mexico agreement negotiation is a conversation Canada is ready to have. Be more like Mexico. Canada's answer is that Mexico's model, removing irritants quickly to secure a negotiation date, is a model that begins from accommodation rather than strength. Canada is building the strength that makes accommodation unnecessary. Absolutely no understanding of Canadian frustration. Canada's answer is that the understanding of Canadian frustration is not what determines Canadian policy. What determines Canadian policy is the strategic reality that a country which can walk away from a negotiation negotiates from strength. And Canada is building the ability to walk away, one pipeline, one trade agreement, one investment record at a time. Accept it. Canada heard the message. Canada's answer is already under construction. Stay with this channel for every development in this story.